About 2 years ago, I saw a movie, and I saw it in the theater. And I think more people should do that to send a signal to the marketplace as to what kind of movies you would like to see. In a theater is where I like to see movies. I do not prefer to watch them at home. I like to do other things when I'm at home, like talking about movies I have seen while sitting down and recording my thoughts on them. But good time. Had Robert Pattinson in it. He played the main character in that movie, and I saw that movie and I thought, wow, I'm gonna see the next thing that this guy is in because that was a fantastic movie. I thought he played a great character in that film. Good Time is a movie that I think should be talked about a lot more, and I'm sad that it doesn't get the attention that I think should be given to it. I think it is a very important artistic artifact of our time. And if you have not seen if you have not seen that movie, go see it. But the point is that Robert Pattinson was in it, and I was like, wow, he's a really good actor. I'm going to see the next thing that he's in because it seems like he knows how to pick the movies that he performs in. So a few months back, I saw in my subscription feed that there's a trailer from the company A24. They distribute a lot of these really interesting movies, and it was called High Life, and I'm like, wow, Robert Pattinson's in it. And it was directed by Claire Denis, who I had never heard of before that. And I looked her up. She's from France and has directed a lot of movies. Being that I've only now seen one of her movies, I can't really tell you what her worldview is, but as it relates to this film, I have a lot to say about what I think it has to say. I remember I just said this, and a lot of people they kind of jumped on me for it. They like, oh, you're stupid, but I'm gonna reiterate it. Just don't react. Just absorb, reflect, and then react. I think that on the whole, European cinema, at least the European cinema that takes place outside of the Anglosphere, is a lot more depraved than Hollywood. I'm not going to say American cinema in general because there are weird little pockets of it of people making really interesting things outside of the Hollywood system. European cinema is, in my view, a lot more perverted than what Hollywood puts out. Now, over the long term, I think what Hollywood does is a little more damaging to the cultural psyche of the nation, but just in a vacuum, the life that we see portrayed from Hollywood, the art that we see from Hollywood, is a lot more sanitized. Whereas in Europe, I don't think they have that as much. To me, it comes off as if European filmmakers don't really have that filtration about them. They portray it. Portray something very perverted or very graphic, and it's not sentimental. It's not fetishized for the most part. Just this is the impression that I'm getting. Just a gut feeling. They're not afraid to create art that is difficult, that is disturbing, that is graphic in some way that will alienate or render the audience uncomfortable in some way. Like on a very deep psychological level. They don't really care if they alienate people or if their work isn't for everybody or if they themselves, their vision or their worldview. If that's not for everybody, they don't care or they don't care as much. And I'm not using this as a pejorative, but this approach probably comes from Europe's very deep tradition of socialism, where if you are creating something, that creation is not so much at the mercy of the marketplace, whether it gets made or doesn't get made, where it gets seen or doesn't get seen. They don't have as much of that. And I think that we can owe that approach, at least to certain aspects of European filmmaking, to that tradition. Orson Welles had a television interview, I think with Entertainment Tonight of all things, where he talked about how he was talking about how he wasted his time and how the marketplace is just the worst thing for the artist. And when I first saw that clip and when I first heard him say that, I thought, well, that can't be right, because how else could you make your art? But I was looking at it from just like a more of a market driven perspective. But the more I reflect on the whims of the whole, what democratic society wants, because dollars are a form of a vote, I think he's right. Consider what the marketplace wants to see in its multiplexes, its suburban multiplexes. It doesn't want to see high life. It doesn't want to see things that are difficult, things that reflect poorly on humanity, things that make them feel kind of bad. No, the marketplace wants spectacle. It wants infantile morality. It wants good guy, bad guy, and let's work together to fight space aliens in capes, in costumes. I've seen superhero movies, all right? I'm not like, yo, you're stupid if you ever seen one. No, that's not what I'm talking about. And you know it. I don't like that artistic and creative endeavors are determined by the will of the masses and their buying power, but that's what we have here in America. And we can either work within that system, which, by the way, never works. It never, you gotta change it from within, but then it just changes you. It's that where that phrase comes from. If you can't beat them, join them, because you cannot separate what is said from how it's said. It's why infiltrating large-scale institutions is basically impossible. You could as an individual, but it's going to change you. But as far as filmmaking goes and what we would like to see in theaters, we can use the marketplace to send a signal to it. And whenever I see something that it seems interesting and has a neat premise and it's got an actual creative person behind it, I put money down on it, even though I might disagree with its premise and its arguments. Which, for the most part, I did not disagree with what I think High Life was arguing or bringing forth with respect to ideas. Again, with European movies, you see more of an extreme. You see a lot of people just using it as an excuse to be perverted and to get, government grants for doing so. It happens a little bit here in America. We have the National Endowment for the Arts. And if you want to see what the money for that is going to, well, take a look. It's very eye-opening. But on the other hand, you get to see some ideas being explored that you wouldn't in American Hollywood cinema, because again, the marketplace just won't tolerate that kind of thing. So what is it about? What do I think of it? What is it saying? High Life is about prisoners who, instead of getting sentenced to death, get sent on a one-way space mission. They're never going to come back from it, and the results of it, as explained in one scene, won't even be known. It will outlive people on Earth. By the time the results of the expedition are known, the people who sent them on their mission will be dead. And they're trying to capture the energy from a black hole or whatever. And in the meantime, they also get sexually experimented on. And none of the weird sex stuff, none of the nudity comes off as titillating, appealing, or whatever. None of it. It's all very cold or animalistic. Filmed in such a way that I only think a woman could accomplish that. And that's a compliment. Because you'll notice that in the Hollywood system, it's all tokenism. None of them actually bring a unique perspective to how things are filmed or portrayed or whatever. But yeah, all of the nudity and all the perversion is not appealing. It's very off-putting, and none of it's romanticized, none of it is sanitized like it would be in a Hollywood film. And to the director's credit, it's difficult to pin down a thesis for this movie, but in that respect, you get the idea, because it's like, these people, they have basically everything they need, yet they conduct their experiments. In fact, I guess you'd call it the main antagonist. It's a lady who is also a violent criminal, but she's some kind of a scientist. She's learned in some respect. But it's revealed eventually that she murdered her family, and that's why she is on this one-way trip. This trip from which she will never return. And she's a eugenicist. She's trying to create the genetically perfect baby through artificial inseminating the women, the lady prisoners on the ship, and she of course extracts it from the men. It's a rough 50-50 split between the men and the women on this space thing, this box floating through space towards black holes. And this woman, despite her relatively advanced age, is she engages in willfully provocative behavior, and she's trying to get Robert Pattinson's seed, his character, and he's the only one without any interest in her. In fact, he's the only one that, I don't know, Andre Benjamin, yeah, Andre 3000's in this movie. He doesn't do a whole lot, but I was glad he was in it. You don't really see him engaged in any sort of weirdo behavior, but Robert Pattinson's like, I'm the only one who's chosen chastity, because he explains in the narration that makes him stronger, and I thought that was interesting. So a scientist lady sees genetic perfection in Robert Pattinson. I don't know the scientist lady's actress's name. I refer to people by actors by their names rather than characters, because I generally don't remember character names. I remember situations and themes and ideas. That's what I take away from movies. But, despite her ostensible sophistication in science and in research, she's a base creature. In fact, the only people who really are more than base creatures in this film, even though they're surrounded by the fanciest technology you could imagine. The only two characters that seem slightly above it are again Andre Benjamin and Robert Pattinson. On the ship there's a masturbation room. That's not a joke, and the lady goes in it, and it's filmed in such a way where she's walking up to it, and like this door opens, and it's like there's like this red seat in there, and I knew at that point, I'm like, something gross is about to happen, something perverted's about to happen, and something does. So she goes in there, and it's like, and she's on that seat, it turns into an animal, and I thought that said a lot about how these people are and what they really value. Because despite all this technology, despite all of the learning that takes place, they're still base carnal creatures, and they act like it. And this theme repeats itself throughout the movie. This lady doesn't need to conduct sick eugenic experiments, sick sexual experiments on these prisoners, but she does. They got a fully functional life support system that's contingent upon them sending their reports off, as it whenever they submit a report, it renews their life support system for another 24 hours. And by the way, this movie is it is sequenced non-linearly, and that really hooks you. That's a great way to do this movie, because at the beginning you see Robert Pattinson and this baby, and he's the only one on the ship, and then he's dumping bodies out of the ship that they're on. He opens the door and dumps them out, and they're floating in space. The movie goes for like 10 minutes of him just his life with his infant daughter, and then he's making food, he's farming the food. They have a little garden in there, and the garden is interesting, because that's like the only place where nothing really bad happens in the movie. There's all this plant life growing and sustaining them. It's a refuge, both for them and the audience. But yeah, at the beginning of the movie, you see him and his daughter, and you're like, how did he get here? What's this all about? And it's really addictive to watch. It's you get more and more information as the movie goes back in time, and you get more of an idea of what this world is all about and how it operates. And it was rewarding to use hack reviewer terminology. But in this movie's world, the most fringe members of society are the ones who are tasked with driving human advancement so we can feign sophistication and progress. And the one individual in this film, the one character we get to know who has climbed up the ranks of credentialism, who does know something about these, what we think of as high-minded subjects. She is an orgasm addict, murdering eugenicist, who, by the way, is also a rapist. There are back-to-back rape scenes in this movie. One's an attempted rape scene because it was never actually completed. But one of the lesser-known prisoners on the ship, he tries to rape Mia Goth's character. And she screams, and that gets everybody's attention, and they end up killing him. But then following that, the scientist lady, she gives everybody a pretty heavy sedative, and she then goes into Robert Pattinson's bunk and then rapes him because she had been interested in him in that way before. And it's interesting. Everybody tried to stop the dude rapist, but the scientist lady, nobody stops, even though there is somebody who is awake and witnessing it at the time. So there's a lot of sick, horrible things happening. And this vision of progress, achievement, doing things that we think of as our species ascending beyond a base creature, is actually being done by very, very bad people who would be a lot better off if they just existed, lived off the dirt and what grows from it, and just let that be. You know, and I like to compare movies with reality, because it's like all this crazy stuff I know is fake. It's not actually happening, but let's think about it. We could draw real life parallels to things. Think about the vaccines for chickenpox, which I didn't know this until pretty recently, but the vaccines for chickenpox are actually derived from the cells of aborted fetuses. The inventor of the lobotomy won the Nobel Prize because he invented the lobotomy. Even more primitive humans weren't that bad. I've talked about trepanation before. and we've found evidence of tribal people doing it for various reasons. And the thing about trepanation is that you only put a hole in the head. You don't put a hole through the brain. You don't destroy part of the brain to do that. And the crazy thing is that the survival percentage of that operation, that's what we're going to call it, the survival rate for it is actually pretty high, even among tribal people. And they didn't go that far. Now, obviously, this is I guess what you would call a regression to a time where it's like we thought that was a good idea, but there was a documentary where a lady's like, "Oh, I hear if you put a hole in your head, you can gain greater consciousness," and she made a documentary about it. You could go read about it on the Lost Media Wiki, I believe, called "A Hole in the Head," and I believe the documentary was called. Go read about it. Going back to the rape scene, the female on male rape scene, that disturbed me not for it's disturbing in and of itself, sure, but what disturbed me more was who was in the movie and who they're associated with. Mia Goth, until recently, was Shia LaBeouf's wife. She is in this movie. She almost gets raped, and then the subsequent scene, you see a situation that happened exactly to Shia LaBeouf in real life. He did some installation where he like tied himself up and people could go into the room and look at him or do whatever. I'm not sure, but the point of it is a woman took advantage of that and raped Shia LaBeouf. Horrible, awful thing. And they were, Shia LaBeouf and his wife, who was in this movie, then wife, they were married during the filming of this, as far as I understand. She's in a movie where her character, she almost gets raped, and then right after that, there's a scene that mirrors what happened to her husband in real life, and that sent chills down my spine. Where I was like watching it, I'm like, oh crap, that's who's in this movie, and this is what's happening. I can't remember having an experience with a movie quite like that, where the reality of real life, the reality of reality, affected me in such a way. Now I like to again, I look at movies in a way that you can, where the art can mirror real life in a way, but it's always in more of like a zeitgeist kind of way. It's never in a direct manner like that. And that's what bothered me most about the whole scene. That it was visceral. I guess that's a mark of some kind of quality of filmmaking. I would hope that this wasn't sort of the impetus for their eventual divorce. That would be really bad, but I can't speculate on matters like that because I don't know. So you have murder, you have rape, you have eugenics, artificial insemination, all taking place on this ship, and that's how our Robert Pattinson's daughter is born. That scene where scientist lady extracts Robert Pattinson's seed, and then she goes and artificially inseminates Mia Goth while she's sedated, and that's how they have a daughter, and that's how that mystery gets solved. So you have humans basically acting like animals, even though we know right from wrong. We are imbued with souls with a moral code upon it, and it's almost worse in some ways. And this is this contrast in behavior, or rather this affirmation of behavior, rather the contrast of how we are and how we should be. It is that's brought home when we're later on in the film. Robert Pattinson and his daughter, she's now a teenager, and they come across another identical ship to theirs, probably maybe with other prisoners on it, they think. So they link up the ships. Robert Pattinson puts on his spacesuit, and he finds that there are dogs in there who have survived by feeding on each other. And these are dogs. They don't know about gardening techniques as the people do, because on the humans ship, they have a garden with food, and it's enough to feed them, and it's all fine. They don't need to inflict horrible crimes on each other. They don't need to experiment on each other, but they do. See, the dogs floating out in space, they don't have a choice but to eat each other. While the humans don't eat each other for sustenance, it ends up the same. They're killing each other, among other things. It's a very fatalistic view of humanity, but given what we celebrate and how those achievements are attained in such ethically questionable ways, it's hard to refute the argument that I think the director is making here. I think she's making a very effective argument. I'm not too sure of a worldview of Claire Denis, but just taking this movie on its own, I have some agreement. We probably would disagree on most of everything else, but at the very least, I can see what she's after here. And by the way, this movie, in standing further contrast than the overly sanitized, phony, sentimental Hollywood crap that comes out, there's a lot of punching women in this movie, like a lot of it, and all of it's portrayed as it's just matter of fact. It's not like, oh, look how horrible this guy, blah blah blah. It's just, yep, that's what is happening here. and maybe there is a reason for it. I'm not saying it's a good or bad reason, but there is a reason. Now put that into contrast with any woman who would direct a Hollywood type film, or a producer who thinks that she's a filmmaker. It is refreshing to see a film actually made by what feels like a real person. Somebody with ideas of their own, with expressions of their own. And again, if you don't want to see that, that's fine. It's your decision, but again, you have to use the marketplace to let these things be known. But this certainly was a movie that was made by somebody with a relatively singular vision on things, and not a movie that was compromised by by 5 or 6 producers all with axes to grind. You got to shoehorn this dialogue in here. We need more of this demographic. It's just assembly line pandering garbage. Modern Hollywood science fiction is, you know what it is. And again, I'll say it, whatever disagreements I may have, and I probably have many with the director of this film, but 100 times out of 99, I'd take a Claire Denis over Kathleen Kennedy.